Hello everybody, Dante here. For those who might be new to the channel, I'm an astrologer, intuitive healer, and a channel. And today our focus is going to be on astrology and the important astrological events and time periods that take place through a person's life that we can see predictably showing up in every person. And these events are going to be influenced by where these planets are placed natally in your chart. Though, without a doubt, these transits and astrological time periods are going to happen. So stay tuned as we're going to look at the entire course of somebody's life journey, and this can give you some insight in the events that have taken place in your life and what you can look forward to. Before we continue, thank you so much for giving a little thumb and liking the video and subscribing if you already haven't. It really helps the channel. And of course, if you're really into astrology and you have friends that are, share this video with them so they can also gain some from the insight I share here today. So we're going to look at 3 different astrological events that take place over the course of somebody's life. And the first of these events is the natural time periods of life, the natural phases of life that we go through. And secondly, it is the maturation of planets, when the planets that represent our ability to deal with certain aspects of life fully come online and we're fully matured and integrated in that component of our being. And finally, though most commonly known perhaps, we're going to look at transits and the return of planets to their natal position, or the aspect of planets to the natal position. And this is the kind of influence that people talk about when they mention the Saturn return. This is the astrological event that almost everybody knows about, though most people aren't aware that there's so many more astrological events than just the Saturn return alone. So today we're going to be talking about all of them and getting a sense of what do we know about someone's life journey that is guaranteed to take place for almost everybody. So let's go all the way into infancy. And the first thing we're going to talk about are these natural time periods, and then we'll integrate some other aspects of it too. The natural time periods comes from the Vedic system. The Sanskrit word is naisargaka, dasha, natural time. And the first time period that one comes into is the moon time period. This is a very instinctual time period. The moon is our mind, our attitude, connects with our heart, and infants in that first year of life are governed by the moon. And the moon, as it connects with our personality, shines forth from us from a very young age. This inner quality of how one behaves and thinks is already coming through one from that very early age. Next is the Mars time period that begins at 1. And Mars is a planet connected with will, assertion, ego, and we all have heard of the terrible twos. And those who have kids have really lived through the terrible twos and how difficult that can be. And this is all about me and learning how to negotiate the boundaries of asserting oneself and getting one's desires fulfilled in this life. And then one enters this Mercury time period. From the age of 3 to 12, Mercury is the planet of learning, it's naturally connected with children. It's a signifier for children. It's a playful planet. Children are very playful and they're engaged in school. They're learning, and that's their main job, is to learn about the world and learn about themselves. At 12, we see one of the first major planetary returns taking place, and that is the Jupiter return. And Jupiter is a planet of learning and growth and luck. So Jupiter returns are generally considered to be lucky, though of course that has to do as well with how Jupiter is placed in your own chart. And this is a time period when people might first start to think about what they want to do with their lives, though of course that isn't really fully realized and integrated till much later. And at 12 also begins the Venus time period. And the Venus time period lasts for 20 years. Venus is a planet connected with our sensuality, our sexuality, our fertility. And the Venus time period is then first of all connected with the coming of puberty. And from then on, the young people are very much oriented towards desires and exploring the world. This is a Venusian thing. They learned about themselves and to discover themselves through art and creativity, and to fully embrace and enjoy the pleasures of the world. These are the powers of the Venus time period and the wonders of the teenage years in the 20s up till the age 32. Though, let's take a moment to pause, because in that time period, there is the maturation of many planets. Jupiter matures at the age of 16, and this is bringing about wisdom, maturity, insight. In our cultures now, there's a lot of sort of rites of passage that still take place at 16, like many people will drive a car for the first time or take care of a car for the first time. It's sort of like we're taking the wheels on life with Jupiter, who is our wisdom and who is our sense of morals and ethics in a lot of ways. And not much later, we have the moon maturing around the age of 22, and this is bringing a sort of growth. And I'm going to check up on 1 second. I knew I was missing something. It's the sun maturing at the age 22. Moon is 24. So first the sun is like, we're developing into our sense of self. We're developing into who we are and how we see and experience ourselves. This identity is forming, and our sense of power and agency is taking more form. And keep in mind as well, these maturations are not just an event, they're said to be a transition that takes place over the course of a year. So Jupiter maturing at 16 begins at 15 for 1 year, hence the rites of passage like the quinceanera and the bar mitzvah and all of these different things. I think that sorry, the bar mitzvah probably happens a little bit earlier now that I'm remembering it. Anyway, but 21, it's a rite of passage in the United States where I'm from. You're allowed to drink alcohol. You're considered to have more maturity. Then 23 to 24, the moon is maturing, and we're having more of a sense of our mind and our mental state and well-being, and our personality is really coming into fruition, because this moon is that inner personality is now really developing and sort of solidifying. We know who we are far more. And this is also the time of the second Jupiter return that's really sending our lives in the trajectory that we're headed. And a lot of people are more determined to adopt a specific career path at this time. They know what they want. They're committing more to it. In a lot of our modern cultures, people are graduating college around this time, and they're starting that career path. So moon maturing, Jupiter return. The next year is this Venus maturation. At 25, people are a little bit less blindly guided by their desires, and they have a bit more control of this nature. There's a lot more sense of how to have healthy relationships, perhaps from having the more dramatic relationships of those teenage years. And then there's an expansion into sharing love in more mature ways. Not long after, at 28, is the Mars maturation. And this is the development of our willpower and the development of our resolve. We might have more power to control our temper. We might have more power to direct our will in helpful ways. Following this at 32 is the Mercury maturation. Mercury is connected with business and with money. So after having a lot of life experience, people start to understand better how to manage their money and not make some of the same mistakes they did in their youth. They have more understanding of how to run a business and how to exchange energy between people. Writing skills and speaking skills come to a more fruition and development. But hold on, before we need to take a step back, because we at 28 with that Mars maturation was also the Saturn return around 29. And Saturn return is getting a bad rep because Saturn is a planet of hard work and discipline. But the thing is that the Saturn return is showing to us the work that we put in. As that planet of hard work and of karma, you reap what you sow. And Saturn return is simply showing us the seeds that we have sown, and we're harvesting them. So for some people, Saturn return can be an amazing experience where they're getting lots of goods and they're getting lots of rewards, and they feel really grateful for the things that they've done with their lives, and now they're able to enjoy some reward already. And this is actually connected neurologically, believe it or not, that neuroscientists have come to see that the parts of our brain that's responsible for understanding long-term consequences only fully develops around that age of 28 or 29. So with Saturn return, we're really coming to understand and integrate these cause and effect, the cause and effect nature of things and karma, how we reap what we sow, how actions that we take lead to things over a long term, and that if we want to see certain results in our lives, we have to act and behave in certain ways and really stay focused on some of those goals. Other people have a more challenging Saturn return, and it has to do with how they've lived and also the placement of their Saturn. If Saturn is in a malefic place or Saturn is just a challenged planet, these beings might find themselves feeling the more shadowy, dark sides of Saturn that are claustrophobic and isolated and depressed. But this isn't the case for everyone, and by understanding the nature of our Saturn and doing the hard work ahead of time, we can actually enjoy that positive Saturn return. So that's around 28, 29, 30, and then 32 is the Mercury maturation, and then the next big event is 36, and this is a slew of different things coming together, and one of them is the second Jupiter return, and this second Jupiter return is sort of like a flashback to that age 24 where we set off on our adventure with our goals and with our education to see how we could make it in the world, and then we're seeing how did that pan out. 36 is also the Saturn maturation, and it's when this quality of Saturn, the discipline, the hard work, the focus, is really tuning into its fullest extent within us. This is when we really develop these deeper qualities of discipline and the compassion that can only be born through suffering. Saturn as a planet of suffering is also connected to how we process suffering. And when we're younger, we are more likely to repress and push away our suffering, but with more and more experiences, we come to learn that this suffering is something that we need to be present with and need to show up to fully. And our ability to deal with that in a mature and spiritual way really kicks in with this Saturn maturation at 36. There's also a nodal return, and I missed pointing out the first nodal return. It is connected with the sort of initial rite of passage into adulthood, 18, and the nodes are connected to our subconscious. They're connected to our deep soul desires and aversions. The North Node is connected with this deep soul yearning. It's something that we're so hungry and thirsty for, so much so that we might even feel possessed by these desires, whereas the South Node is something that we don't want and that we chronically avoid. And a lot of astrologers will say things like the North Node is where our soul is progressing towards, whereas the South Node is what we have inherited from our past lives. And even though we don't want to fully embrace all of these things from the past lives, there's gifts that come from these lives. And there's some truth to this as well, though what's really important to understand is that this nature of desires, and at 18 we're getting this sort of burst of desires, of remembering what our soul came into, incarnate into, and it's sending us off into this path of individuation. And at 36 there's this pause moment where we realize that our youth is gone, and now it's a time to begin another phase of life. And in this new phase of life, we're reevaluating what these deep soul desires and aversions are, and how they have brought us to navigate the course of life so far, so that we can perhaps bring more wisdom into the process. Ideally, we have that Saturnine energy of control and discipline that allows us to not be so thrown around and tossed around by these desires. All right, so then fast forward another 6 years, and at the age of 42, there's two different things that happen. And one of them is the Uranus opposition. This is the midlife crisis. Uranus is a planet of awakening and spontaneous sudden change and transformation. And an opposition has very much that energy as well. There's some paradox that comes with opposition. It can be a very helpful energy, and with Uranus, it's an energy that turns things upside down. Again, as people are entering into this time of aging and they've looked back at their lives and all that has taken place, there's a lot of questions. There might be regrets, and there might be this sense that I only have so much time, I only have one last chance to do all of these things that I still want to do. And a lot of people will make a complete shift in their lives. They might begin something new or try to make the most out of the time that they have by doing something totally unconventional. Uranus is a sign that is absolutely or a planet rather, that's absolutely unconventional and out of the box. So many people will find themselves stepping outside of the box, especially if their Uranus is a very significant planet in their chart. And this is also, in the Vedic system, the time when the planet Rahu matures. I and many astrologers link Uranus and Rahu. They have a deep level of association because they are connected with many things that are kind of common. Uranus is the outsider, Rahu is the outsider. Uranus has an energy of deep desire and craving for evolution. So does Rahu. They're both planets connected with soul, evolution, and progress, and shifts that can be sudden and intense. But Rahu maturation is kind of like we get a grip on our desires. We understand these underlying subconscious desires that have been motivating us and sending us in so many different directions over the course of our lifetime, and we now have the ability to restrain them a little bit and to focus more on what's really important and what's really significant for our personal growth. And this leads into some big shifts taking place in one's life, especially if one has challenged Rahu in some way, a debilitated Rahu in some way, or a placement like Kalasarpa Yoga that makes Rahu a very significant planet. Now, the last big maturation is the Ketu maturation. And this is the last of these traditional 9 planets that matures. And Ketu is connected with our deeper soul's hidden mysteries, is a time where we might tune into the more mysterious realms. It's the age 48. It's a time when we might get over our aversions and stop running. We might learn to embrace what we've been running from. We might start to develop a more spiritual focus and orientation in our lives. And this can help us tremendously to awaken spiritually and to grow and evolve. Again, it was a little bit hard to do all of this chronologically, so let me take a step back. Remember when I said from that age of 12 to 32, we're in this time period of Venus. Desires become so important, and then at 32 Mercury matures, and also we shift from Venus time period into Jupiter time period. And this is a time period that is more focused on Jupiter's qualities. Jupiter is about spirituality and philosophy, though Jupiter is also focused on traditional values like the family. So family might become the most significant part of one's life at this time, or spreading one's wisdom in the world, or carrying out their dharma, as they say in the East, or your sort of life purpose or path can become very important during the Jupiter time period. It's a very worldly and focused time period where one is carrying out what one is essentially here to bring in. And so this Jupiter time period lasts until the age of 50. And one more thing to mention in this time is the Saturn opposition takes place around that age of 44, and sometimes it takes place a little bit before that. And note here that Saturn is moving in 7-year cycles. So we didn't focus on all of these cycles, but know that every 7 years there's something coming up with Saturn. There's some challenge coming up with Saturn, that Saturn can be causing us to start something new or leave something behind, or to become more disciplined and focused. And the Saturn opposition, kind of like the Uranus opposition, is challenging us to get out of our own way and to make changes in our lives. Uranus brings us outside of the box, but Saturn asks us to get real. So Saturn opposition usually happens a little bit after the Uranus opposition, and it can help us to bring those sort of more spacey, out there, evolutionary energies of the Uranus opposition deeper into reality. This leads to that age of 50, where after all of the planets have matured and we've been through Saturn and Uranus opposition, now the focus of our life becomes far more spiritual. The sun is connected with spirituality, it's connected with goodness, and it's connected with leadership as well. So many step into this leadership or elder rule at the age of 50. They go beyond being simply somebody learning or sharing their knowledge into somebody who's really mastered themselves and can share and hold that wisdom with others. And this time period is one that, of course, depends on the quality of your sun. All of these time periods are going to be influenced by how these planets are naturally placed in your chart. Actually, in the East, in India and some other countries, there is a way of life that many people live by, wherein they live the life of a householder and with a family and a job and all of this up until later in their life, where it's natural that many people now come to devote their lives to spirituality in their older age. And so if you're part of a traditional culture, that shift to living more spiritually might be literal, though for many of us in Western society, this might be a more internalized shift where you still do the things of the world, but what's more significant for you is now on an inner spiritual plane. And the last shift of these natural time periods is in the age of 70, when somebody enters their Saturn time period. And Saturn is a planet of decay and aging. Saturn can be connected with our bad habits. So again, depending on the placement of your Saturn, you'll see how this shows up. Though this is a time period of preparing to leave the world, Saturn is connected with death, and at this time people are preparing for that transition into spirit and all that that will bring. So even beyond that, there can be, according to some perspectives, the time periods of Rahu Ketu, and this is bringing out that deeper and more karmic influence, though undeniably that Saturn energy remains present through all the duration of one's last years of life. Now, in addition to all of these time periods, there's so many other influences in an individual's chart that can also be timed from the moment someone is born. In the Vedic system, there is the dasha that begins according to the position of the moon at the moment you're born. A whole system like clockwork unfolds from that moment, and there's 9 time periods of life connected with the 9 planets that people go through, and really most people don't get past the 7th of those time periods, though those who live to be very old will live through all of those time periods. And as we move through these long chapters of life connected with the 9 planets, you will experience how those planets are placed in your chart. If the planet is well dignified and has a lot of positive aspects, those positive aspects will show up. The strength of the planet will show up and lift you up. Though if the planet has challenges, you will face the challenges indicated by the natal chart during that time of your life. And there's many factors to consider when looking at dashas, and they all factor in with transits as well. And so the planets are moving through the houses, and they bring certain influences into the parts of your life that they touch, according to the house rulership, and also according to the angles that they are casting upon other planets. And that is more of the approach of the Western system, is to examine these angles and see through them when specific sorts of influences are going to show up. And both of these systems work, as do so many other systems of divination. Let me throw in one more thing. For example, the Mayan system of divination does connect with this as well. You can consider how the Mayan people consider at the age 26 that one really enters adulthood, and brings their gifts into the world, as connected with that maturation of Venus that happens around 25, so similar time frame, right? And Venus was a very important planet for the Mayans, and it's in this time period that one is like living and acting in the world. And then for the Mayans, around the age 52, somebody becomes an elder and they become a respected member of their society. This belief is really in alignment with the time periods that's seen by the Vedics. And I would be so interested, or I am so interested, to learn more about different systems of time that are practiced by people around the world. There's so much in common as much as there are things that are unique in all of these systems. So if you want to take a deeper look at how the planets and how time is going to bring about certain potentials for you, then you can book a reading and we can chat about it. And I like to emphasize this, that these are potentials, that none of the things in the stars are destined to be a certain way, that we have free will and agency regardless of what the stars may be indicating, and that these systems are simply mirror reflections that show us the probable energetic configurations. And we can never change the fact that Saturn and Jupiter are going to be in the position that they're going to be in a year from now, and we know exactly from our years and thousands of years of astronomy exactly where these planets will be a year from now. And also, by knowing that, we can plan ahead to work with the energies of the present to make the most out of these things to come. And absolutely, I can say that with all the transits I see, there's benefits and there's drawbacks, and I can see them playing out really significantly in my own life. Like Rahu in the 12th house brings some challenges, but it also brings travel. And when I saw all of the things that were possible for that time period of Rahu in the 12th house, while I'm in a Rahu period, I thought, well, out of all of the things that could happen, travel is the most positive, and travel is really what my heart wants in this moment. So I'm going to go do it, and it was the most amazing experience of my life. So when you see all of the possible indications of a transit, and you see the ones that align with you most, you can choose that and bring those into being. I hope this helps you, and of course, astrology is a complex subject, and I covered content that could be expanded into 3 or 4 or 5 videos in a short frame of time to sort of give you a fast forward zoom, a fast forward overview of a lifetime according to astrology, and it's much more complex than this. So I encourage you as well to look deeper into the topics that interest you, as the interest is there for a reason. I really thank you for watching this video, and if you haven't already, like, subscribe, share, all the things. I really appreciate it. It helps so much, and I'll see you next time. Much love, many blessings.